The words landed heavy, deliberate, like a lock clicking into place. My sister Brianna didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She just looked me dead in the eye, reached out with surgical calm, and tore my passport clean in half. No hesitation, no flicker of doubt. She folded the torn blue booklet once, twice, and dropped it straight into the toilet bowl. For half a second, nothing happened. The paper floated there, obscene and fragile, like a joke waiting for a punchline. Then she flushed. The water spun, fast and merciless, dragging $6,000 and my freedom into a porcelain grave. Brianna leaned against the sink, smirked, and said, "Now you have to stay and watch my kid." I turned to my parents. My heart was slamming so hard, I could feel it in my throat. I waited for shouting, for outrage, for someone to grab her wrist and say, "What the hell are you doing?" I waited for my mother to scream, or my father to step in front of me like he used to when I was a kid. They didn't. They stood in the doorway and laughed. Not nervous laughter, not shocked laughter. Real laughter. Amused, relieved. That was the moment everything shifted. The air in the house felt different, heavier, like the oxygen had been rationed and I'd just been cut off. This wasn't a family home anymore. It was a prison. And I wasn't a daughter. I was an asset that had just tried to escape. My name is Haley. I'm 24 years old. And for my entire adult life, I have been the family bank. I went upstairs without another word. I didn't slam the stairs. I didn't shout. I walked because panic would have made them feel powerful. Inside my bedroom, I closed the door and shoved a chair under the handle. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely unzip my suitcase. But I forced them to obey. I didn't cry. Crying would come later, when I was safe. On my desk sat a stack of invoices, dog-eared and highlighted, the paper proof of 2 years of freelance graphic design work. Logos, banners, brand kits, website mock-ups, midnight deadlines, clients who forgot to pay, projects I finished at 3 a.m. with instant coffee and aching wrists. I scooped the invoices into my bag like they were evidence from a crime scene. I glanced at the spreadsheet taped to my wall. A single number stared back at me in black ink. $6,500. That was the Italy fund. People always called it vacation money, like it was something frivolous, something indulgent. It wasn't. It was thousands of skipped lunches. Thousands of times I said no to friends, no to concerts, no to weekends away. It was me choosing work over rest again and again, so that one day I could stand in a country where no one knew my role in the family hierarchy. Italy wasn't about sightseeing. It was about breathing without permission. And in less than 10 seconds, Brianna had flushed it away. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, another number surfaced in my mind, sharp and unavoidable. 15,000? That was the real total. The running tab. The amount I had loaned Brianna over the years. Emergency rent. Car repairs that never happened. Medical bills that mysteriously disappeared once the money cleared. Loans that turned into gifts the moment I realized asking for repayment would trigger a meltdown that would consume the entire house. I remembered last week with sudden, icy clarity. She had cornered me in the kitchen while our parents pretended not to listen. Her voice was sweet, syrupy, the tone she used when she wanted something big. She didn't ask me to babysit Mason that time. She asked for $6,000. For a mommy makeover, plastic surgery she said she deserved for giving our parents a grandchild. She talked about it like it was compensation owed, like childbirth had earned her a payout from the universe, and I was the cashier. When I told her that money was for my trip, for my life, her face didn't crumple. It hardened. Her eyes went cold, calculating. That was when I finally understood the math of a narcissist. To Brianna, my savings weren't my property. They were a resource she hadn't extracted yet. My refusal wasn't just a no, it was a theft. In her twisted internal ledger, my success was an insult to her struggles. Every dollar I saved was a dollar she believed had been taken from her. She didn't destroy my passport because she needed a babysitter. She destroyed it to balance the equation. If she couldn't have the money, I couldn't have the joy. If she was stuck, I had to be stuck too. She needed to drag me back down to zero, to make sure the little sister stayed little. I snapped my suitcase shut. They thought this was about a vacation. They thought I was throwing a tantrum over a missed flight. They didn't realize the ledger was full. I was done paying the Brianna tax. I grabbed my bag and opened the door. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Like the house was holding its breath. I walked down the stairs slowly, my boots hitting the hardwood in a steady rhythm. Not running. Running makes you look like prey. I could feel their eyes on my back. Brianna, my mother, my father, but I didn't turn around. My only goal was the front door. I reached for the brass handle. My fingers were inches from the cold metal when a hand slammed against the wood beside my head. The sound cracked through the entryway. I froze. My father stood there, blocking the door. He didn't look like the man who taught me how to drive or walked me to the bus stop. He looked like a bouncer guarding a club I wasn't allowed into. Without a word, he reached up and slid the deadbolt shut. Click. The sound echoed like a judge's gavel. "You're not walking out on this family," he growled. And just like that, I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't chaos. This was control. And I was about to find out how far they were willing to go to keep it. "Get out of the way." My voice came out low and steady, even though my knees were trembling. I didn't recognize it as my own. It sounded older, harder, like it belonged to someone who had already survived the worst part and was speaking from the other side of it. My father didn't move. "You aren't leaving," he said again, slower this time, like he was explaining something simple to a child. "You're going to turn around, go back into that kitchen, and apologize to your sister." I stared at him, waiting for the absurdity of it to sink in. "She destroyed my passport," I said. "She flushed $6,000 down the toilet. And you want me to apologize?" "She's stressed," my mother snapped, stepping up beside him. Her voice had lost its softness, its fake concern. What replaced it was sharp and impatient, the tone she used when I inconvenienced her. "Don't be dramatic, Haley. Just transfer the money to Brianna's account. If you give her the $6,000, we can forget you tried to run away. We can be a family again." The air left my lungs in a slow, hollow exhale. There it was, clean, undeniable. They didn't want an apology. They wanted a transaction. This wasn't a family meeting. It wasn't an intervention. It was a hostage negotiation. And I was the ransom. They were holding me in my childhood home until I paid the Brianna tax one last time. I looked at my mother's face, really looked at it. For years, I had told myself she was a victim too, that she walked on eggshells around Brianna the same way I did, that her silence was fear, not consent. But as she stood there blocking the exit, demanding my life savings to fund her golden child's vanity surgery, the illusion shattered. They weren't peacekeepers. They were human shields. They knew Brianna was a monster. They had created her, fed her, and protected her from consequences her entire life. But they were too weak to deal with her rage, too afraid of her tantrums. So they made a calculation. It was easier to sacrifice me. The quiet one. The reliable one. The one who would bleed silently. They would rather watch me drown financially than listen to Brianna scream for 5 minutes. They weren't protecting the family. They were protecting their own comfort at the expense of my survival. "You're not asking for help," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like glass. "You're extorting me." "We're parenting you," my father shouted, his face red, his jaw clenched. "Now give us your phone and make the transfer, or you're not leaving this house." I looked at the deadbolt. I looked at his clenched fists. I measured the distance between us and knew with sick clarity that I couldn't push past him. He was stronger than me, and he was desperate. But he had forgotten something. I grew up in this house too. I knew its blind spots, I knew its weaknesses, and I knew exactly where he kept the things he thought were untouchable. "Okay," I said suddenly, stepping back. I let my shoulders slump. I let my bag slide from my grip and hit the floor with a soft thud. "You win." The shift in their posture was immediate. My father relaxed, just a fraction. My mother's mouth curved into a smug little smile she didn't bother to hide. "I need to use the bathroom first," I added. "Then I'll pay her." They bought it. Of course they did. They'd spent my entire life believing I would always fold, always comply, always choose peace over dignity. I turned away from the front door and walked down the hallway calmly, counting my steps, keeping my breathing even. But instead of turning toward the bathroom, I broke into a sprint. I ran toward the back of the house, toward the one room my father treated like a fortress. "Haley!" he shouted behind me. I heard his footsteps, heavy and panicked. His fingers brushed the strap of my bag as he lunged, but he was too slow. I reached the heavy oak door of his home office and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. I twisted the deadbolt, then the secondary floor latch. His shoulder hit the wood a split second later. The door shuddered, the impact rattling the frame, but it held. This room had been built to keep the world out. Now it was keeping him out. "Open this door!" my father screamed, pounding on the wood with a violent rhythm that made the floor vibrate beneath my feet. "You're making this worse! You're destroying this family!" I didn't answer. I didn't waste breath screaming back. I dropped my bag and sank into the leather chair behind his massive mahogany desk. My hands were no longer shaking. The fear that had fueled me minutes ago evaporated, replaced by something colder and sharper. Clarity. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the auditor. I woke the computer monitor. The screen flickered to life, demanding a password. I typed it in without hesitation. My mother's birthday followed by his favorite football jersey number. He had never changed it since I set the system up for him 5 years ago. "Access granted." Outside the door, they screamed and kicked, their voices muffled but frantic. Inside the office, everything was silent and still. I navigated straight to the family cloud server. My father was a digital hoarder. He kept records of everything, convinced that documentation meant control. He never imagined the records would be used against him. First, the security system. I pulled up the timeline from 20 minutes earlier. There it was. The hallway footage showed Brianna tearing my passport in half, her face lit with satisfaction. The flush, the smirk. Another clip showed the living room, my father blocking the front door, my mother demanding the transfer, extortion, false imprisonment, destruction of property. I downloaded the clips to my phone and emailed a backup to a secure server. But I wasn't done. For months, I had noticed odd letters arriving from banks I didn't recognize. Letters my mother would snatch from the mailbox before anyone else could see them. I opened the folder labeled Finances and clicked through subfolders until I found one labeled with a single letter, B. My chest tightened as I opened the first PDF. It was a credit card statement. The balance read $15,000, and the cardholder's name wasn't Brianna's. It was her husband's. And the billing address wasn't their apartment. It was a P.O. box in my father's name. My stomach dropped. I opened the next file. Then the next. Another card. Another balance. $12,000. $18,000. The total climbed past $45,000. I stared at the screen, the blue glow reflecting in my eyes as the truth settled in with crushing weight. This wasn't just Brianna being bad with money. This was identity theft. And my parents weren't just ignoring it. They were helping her get away with it. Outside the door, the pounding slowed. My mother's voice replaced it, trembling and tearful. "Haley, please, we just want to help you. Don't do anything you can't take back." I whispered to the empty room, my eyes still on the screen. "I'm not doing anything." I clicked export. "I'm just forwarding the mail." I compiled the credit card statements into a single file, my movements precise and calm. Each click felt deliberate. Final. I attached the security footage of Brianna tearing my passport apart, of my father slamming the deadbolt shut, of my mother demanding the transfer like she was collecting a debt. I opened a new email and typed Brandon's work address into the recipient line. Subject, the debt you don't know about. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Sending that email wouldn't just expose Brianna, it would detonate her marriage, shatter the story my parents had spent years maintaining, and burn the family tree down to its roots. I thought about the toilet bowl, the swirl, my future disappearing while they laughed. I clicked send. Then I dialed 911. "My name is Haley," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos pounding outside the door. "I'm being held against my will at 2847 Maple Street. My father has barricaded the exits and is refusing to let me leave. I am in immediate danger." I didn't wait for questions. I ended the call and sat back, heart hammering, listening. Sirens came fast. Red and blue lights washed over the walls of the study, flashing through the blinds in sharp, stuttering bursts. Relief flooded me so suddenly it almost knocked the breath from my lungs. This was it. The siege was over. The truth would finally matter. I stood, crossed the room, and unlocked the door. The moment the deadbolt clicked, the door didn't ease open. It flew wide. But it wasn't the police standing there. It was Brianna. She looked like she'd been through a massacre. Blood streaked down her left cheek. Deep, jagged scratches tore across her face, angry red lines I recognized instantly with sickening certainty. Her own fingernails. Her blouse was ripped at the shoulder. Her hair hung in a wild, tangled mess. "Help!" she screamed, raw and piercing. She staggered backward into the hallway just as the front door burst open and 2 uniformed officers stormed inside. She went crazy, Brianna sobbed, collapsing at the feet of the lead officer. She tried to kill me. She pointed at me with a shaking hand, her body convulsing with what looked like terror but felt like pure adrenaline. My sister attacked me. She stole my diamond ring, and when I tried to get it back, look what she did. I stood frozen in the doorway of the office. My hands were empty. My bag sat untouched on the floor behind me. I hadn't been within 10 feet of her since I ran. The officer looked from her bleeding face to my stillness. "Ma'am," he said sharply, his hand resting near his holster. "Let me see your hands." "I didn't touch her," I said. My voice was calm but tight with shock. "She did that to herself. She's lying." "She's not lying!" my mother wailed, rushing forward and dropping to her knees beside Brianna. She wrapped her arms around her, rocking her like a wounded child. Tears streamed down her face, but none of them were for me. "Haley just snapped," she told the officer, her voice trembling perfectly. "She's been unstable for weeks. She was demanding money, and when we said no, she lost it. We were just trying to keep her safe until you arrived." I looked at my father. Richard stood by the wall, hands folded, his face carved into an expression of tragic regret. He nodded slowly. "It's true. We didn't want to call the police. We were trying to protect her from herself. But she became violent. It was a masterclass in betrayal. They weren't just lying. They were rewriting reality in real time. They were willing to send me to jail, to brand me with a criminal record, to destroy my future completely if it meant protecting Brianna from consequences. They had chosen their side, and it wasn't truth. It was convenience." The officer stepped toward me, cold metal closed around my wrists. "You are being detained for domestic assault," he said. The click of the handcuffs was final and suffocating. The weight of them dragged my shoulders forward as they guided me toward the door. I was being arrested in the house I grew up in, framed by the people who raised me. As they marched me past the huddle of my family, Brianna peeked out from my mother's shoulder. Her sobs stopped instantly. The fear vanished from her eyes, replaced by that familiar, poisonous smirk. "I win," her expression said. "You tried to fight the golden child. The injustice burned in my throat like acid. They had stolen my money, destroyed my property, held me hostage, and now they were pinning a felony on me. It looked like the end. But Brianna forgot one thing. I wasn't just the sister she bullied. I was the one who installed the security system. "Officer," I said evenly as they paused near the door, "my phone is in my back pocket. Please unlock it." He hesitated, then retrieved it. I guided him calmly. "Open the Blue Shield app." The room fell silent as the video began to play. My father blocking the door, my mother demanding the transfer, Brianna clawing her own face in the hallway before throwing herself to the floor. Reality reasserted itself in high definition. The officer's jaw tightened. He removed the cuffs from my wrists and turned sharply toward Brianna. "Ma'am, stand up." She screamed that the footage was fake, that I was manipulating everything, but it didn't matter. The truth had teeth. She was arrested for filing a false police report and destruction of federal property. Then the front door opened again. Brandon walked in, not running to save his wife, running straight at my father. He held his phone out, shaking with fury. "You knew?" he said. "You all knew. She stole my identity. $45,000. I'm pressing charges, I'm taking my son, and I'm filing for divorce." The room collapsed inward on itself. My parents turned on me with naked rage. My father hissed that I was homeless now, that I'd destroyed everything. I laughed and handed him the deed. The paperwork he'd forgotten about. The house title he put me on years ago when his credit was ruined. I owned half. And I was forcing a court-ordered sale unless they paid me $50,000 in 30 days. They couldn't. 6 months later, I was eating gelato in Rome when my phone buzzed. $62,450 deposited. Brianna took probation. Brandon got full custody. My parents lost the house and now lived cramped in an apartment with her. I sent one selfie to the family chat. Worth the wait. Then I blocked them all. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Family isn't sacrifice without return. Peace comes from walking away,